So that was kind of how the research began. And then there was this accidental ingestion of one of the compounds that was being derived from some of these like fungi and different things. And that was LSD. And that famous story of Hoffman riding his bike high home,
I don't
from
know
the
this
lab.
story.
And yeah,
Can
so
you tell me?
it was I'm probably going to get it
Okay.
wrong, but generally speaking,
This is awesome.
this chemist, Albert Hoffman, was the one who was responsible for kind of deriving some of these compounds. They were testing all these different compounds and generating these compounds from I think it was ergot, but I could be wrong. I can't remember exactly what they were using to kind of derive these compounds, and they had a whole bunch of them, but I think it was LSD 25 was the original LSD.
Which,
and
if people don't know, if you touch that shit, sometimes it can.
So he was synthesizing this stuff, and I guess he had accidentally ingested some somehow, or I don't remember how the contact happened for him, but he was riding his bike home from the lab and had the most incredible trip ever, and was just like, oh my gosh, like this is something.
the best bike ride ever.
Yeah. So that's when it was like, well, okay, like why does this compound induce this euphoric, interesting state? And so then it kind of, LSD became sort of that original. I think that people in the psychedelic community celebrate Bicycle Day as the day that
really?
that he rode his bike
That's
home.
hilarious. Next thing you know, you're on tour with the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. Yeah, but other compounds like psilocybin, for example, was used in ceremonies in Central America and Mexico for a long time. You have another compound, or I guess multiple compounds in one, ayahuasca, which is used sacramentally in tribal communities in the Amazon. You have iboga, the shrub in Africa, that was used in ceremonies in places in Africa. So it's not just that this started from, research into psychosis. There were communities all over the world using locally derived compounds from plants and shrubs and fungi to induce different spiritual states and have sort of a ceremony or sacrament around this experience. And it was meant to be this tribal thing. Often healing was involved. Sometimes it was healing of a community or an individual, or preparation even for hunting. And there's lots of different reasons why people were using these things. I think as Westerners, our scientific minds are really curious around this stuff. And of course, we want to know
but it was a freaking party, right? It was a social thing,
and
right?
then it became, the psychedelic movement kind of became, and then, there's obviously governmental testing. And, there's a whole slew of things around it. But what we do know now, so luckily the research has picked up again after the whole shutdown of the, war on drugs and sort of putting the kibosh on any research. More recent research has kicked up here in the States, but also in other countries. Like Brazil's done a really good job. The researchers there who have looked into ayahuasca and done clinical trials on individuals with trauma, PTSD specifically, or generalized trauma, or people who have suffered from depression or anxiety disorders. People are looking at individuals with these conditions and asking the question, we have these compounds, and we're seeing anecdotally from what we know of what's happening in tribal communities or people who have taken it, these really positive changes and benefits. What is happening and why and what's going on? And so now we're seeing this huge bloom of clinical trials being done with these substances, which I think is really, really powerful, because if we can do something like take something like psilocybin in a controlled setting to overcome alcohol addiction, I mean, that's incredible. There's nothing on the planet that will do that. So if psilocybin is the thing that can do that for people, of course we should explore that.
Absolutely.
So there's lots of stuff like that that's coming out that's really beneficial, but there is this dark side of it, which is a lot of times people, especially Westerners, you don't always see this in other nations, but here in the States, we have this mentality of if some is good, more is better. And, and I want to
right down to food. I mean,
yes. And we chase comfort and the feel-good pleasure feelings. We don't do well with discomfort here, whereas a lot of other places people can kind of deal with that better. It's just sort of a known thing that we all go through.
I think some of it's genetic too, because we've had it so good for so long.
Yeah.
You don't realize until you walk into a third world country and see how people are living there on the masses. how good we have it. It
And
makes you
sometimes-
appreciate home, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
and sometimes you go to the poorest places and they're the most joyful people you've ever met.
oh, some of the happiest. Like one of the craziest experiences that I've ever had was sober on a beach outside of Brazil or outside of Rio on a surf trip. And I was lucky enough to go with this local dude that I made friends with. And he took me to a surf beach where these kids were riding like pieces of wood, broken surfboards. They had literally
awesome.
Nothing.
Yeah.
They were living in like grass, palm, like huts, no clothes really at all, and just eating fish, living off the land, and the happiest people to like take you in, like hospitable, like genuine, like I couldn't even, they were speaking like a native Portuguese, like it was Portuguese, but it wasn't like, so I couldn't understand even a little bit of Portuguese, but like just amazing experience.
Yeah.
And they literally have nothing. Like they couldn't go to the grocery store and buy a bottle of water.
Right. Yeah.
They don't have currency. Like their currency is here, food
What you
or
can
whatever.
do for each other.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. And
Or
that's
human emotion, really. Like, so
Yeah.
it's like that opened my eyes so much. So like, fuck, man, you really don't need anything when it comes down to it. Like,
I know. And that's we
what you
lost,
need is love.
I mean, truly,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a simple life and a lot of love and like being real humans with each other, you know?
Yeah.
And like we've gotten so far from that here in our country, and everybody wants to be completely comfortable all the time, whether it's emotionally or physically or, you know, whatever. And so we don't often go to these places where we can sit with the discomfort of life, whether it, especially emotionally. Sometimes we're really good at the physical part, but that plays into how we deal with something like psychedelics, where what I've seen, especially in in all the communities, but I see it a lot in the veteran community because I'm just part of that space. And a lot of times people will feel better when they take something like that for a period of time. And then when things don't feel good again, they'll be like, oh, I just need to go do another ceremony. I'm going to go do this again. And it's like, hey, maybe life's kind of hard right now. And like, it is a little shitty. And maybe, you know, there's some things that you need to experience because you need the information to make a change or learn something from what you're going through. If you just every time you're having an off day or you can't think, you know, like people use it for creativity and cognition. It's like, well, I can't think straight. I must need to do more. It's like, no, you're having a day, man. You're a normal human and you're not always going to be like on all the time. You know?
Especially with creatives, because like
that's their currency.
Stephen Pressfield has been a godsend to me in his writing and what he's written as far as creating art. And his kind of his self-help for the artist or like writer or whatever. And it applies to anybody, whether they're, you know, crocheting scarves or whatever, right? Like it will apply to whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's a lot of suck that happens with it. There's a ton, right? There's a ton of,
And we've somehow twisted this ideal image of life into constant performance, constant joy, and the social media thing doesn't help either because that's all you see.
It's like, just instant gratification, I think, right?
Yeah, and so we can sometimes take a good thing like psychedelics or anything and something that is a tool and is a good thing and turn it into something that actually causes more harm or causes us to, you know, do the opposite of growth and healing. And, you know, so it's a challenging space in general, but I think it speaks more to the underlying culture that we have here rather than the medicines themselves.
Yeah, you have to be careful with it. I mean,